Of course, last night there was more protesting across the country in Portland, and we saw protesting erupt in upstate New York over a video from March of a guy dying in police custody. There's a lot of more information that has to come out around there, but for the most part, it does seem like that protest was peaceful. I think at this point, I can only do opening morning segments, rolling my eyes and saying, yeah, we get it, there's riots. We just got to talk about the bigger picture. And last night, Donald Trump announced that he wanted to defund anarchist jurisdiction. So you may have heard about this. We did talk about it in the IRL podcast, but there's an update. Governor Cuomo has issued a veiled mafioso-like threat saying Trump better have an army to protect him if he comes to NYC. A lot of people are wondering why it is that Donald Trump doesn't just deploy the National Guard, invoke the Insurrection Act, and march on in and shut these riots down. A lot of people are saying if Trump won't do this, then it really is his America. Because even if the Democrats aren't willing to do their jobs, Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act and shut it all down. Well, I actually have an article that talks about that. This is from Town Hall, why Trump doesn't just send in the troops. So let's talk about what Trump wants to do with these cities, and Cuomo's response. And I want to show you a really good argument as to why Trump should not invoke the Insurrection Act. And Cuomo is all the proof we need. I'll give you the gist of it. Imagine if Trump deployed federal troops, military, into New York when Cuomo is sending him threats. What would it be like for the people in that city? What would it be like for the military or the individuals going in to ensure the riots stop? If they're being opposed by all of the institutions of that jurisdiction, it would look more like an invasion, and it would just be more chaos. Trump, when you invoke the Insurrection Act, presumably, or at least in the past, it's with the assistance of local authorities to try and get a handle on chaos. But when Democrats are openly revolting against Trump, what can you do about it? That's a dangerous divide for this country. And maybe I won't go so far as say those two awful, I'll just say it. I mean, civil war. I mean, what do you think happens when the governor of New York says Trump better have an army to protect him? Trump's the president. If he wants to go to New York, he can go to New York. He doesn't need the governor saying that to him. I'll go through this, just the Trump story on defunding these cities quickly, just to give you the context and then give you the update. The New York Post says Trump orders review to defund NYC other anarchist cities. President Trump is ordering the federal government to begin the process of defunding New York City and 3 other cities where officials allowed lawless protests and cut police budgets amid rising violent crime, the Post can exclusively reveal. Trump on Wednesday signed a 5-page memo ordering all federal agencies to send reports to the White House Office of Management and Budget that detail funds that can be redirected. New York City, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Portland are initial targets as Trump makes law and order a centerpiece of his re-election campaign after months of unrest and violence following the May killing of George Floyd by Minnesota police. My administration will not allow federal tax dollars to fund cities that allow themselves to deteriorate into lawless zones, Trump says in the memo, which twice mentions New York Mayor Bill de Blasio by name. To ensure that federal funds are neither unduly wasted nor spent in a manner that directly violates our government's promise to protect life, liberty, and property, it is imperative that the federal government review the use of federal funds by jurisdictions that permit anarchy, violence, and destruction in America's cities. Federal agencies must detail all federal funds provided to Seattle, Portland, New York, and D.C. within 14 days. Attorney General Bill Barr must develop a list of anarchist jurisdictions that permitted violence and the destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to restore order. The memo does not require Barr to include the 4 cities, possibly for legal reasons. The memo instructs White House Budget Director Russ Vought to issue guidance in 30 days from Wednesday to the heads of agencies on restricting eligibility of or otherwise disfavoring to the maximum extent permitted by law anarchist jurisdictions in the receipt of federal grants. We did go over this on the IRL podcast last night, so I don't want to rehash too much. We'll have a segment on that up later. We have a development here. Governor Cuomo, Trump better have an army to protect him if he comes to NYC. The seeds are being planted for civil war. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing it. I don't know what to tell you, man. Can you just, to those that doubt this, just think about the trajectory we are on. mass civil unrest in many cities across this country. No, it's not hundreds of thousands of people burning their cities down, because that's not typically what mass civil unrest looks like. Like I mentioned, in Egypt, the revolution was several thousand people in Tahrir Square, yet the military still came in and removed the government and assumed power. Our military is saying they're not going to get involved in that. But think about the conflict between Trump supporters, Antifa, far leftists, violence in the streets. And now we have the story out of Portland, which most of you probably know by now, of a Trump supporter being executed. The latest development from that is apparently the man was near his home. The guy in Portland wasn't from out of town. He was apparently walking near his own home when he was targeted in what appeared to have been far leftists on the prowl looking for Trump supporters to kill. You think about that escalation. Now the Proud Boys say they're going to be coming up to Portland on the 24th to 26th, which is a recipe for chaos, in my opinion. Granted, I understand people have a right to peacefully assemble, but I think Antifa will take advantage and it's going to be conflict. Now you take this into consideration. The states have been actively opposing and rejecting and resisting assistance from the federal government while their cities burn. They would rather watch their own cities burn to the ground before giving anything to Donald Trump. They hate Trump so much, they want you to pay. They want you to suffer. They want to watch your home attacked. When these Antifa people and these far left Black Lives Matter people march through residential neighborhoods screaming, "Wake up, mother effer, wake up. No justice, no sleep," threatening to burn down residential buildings, then actually going to a condo and throwing flaming debris into the first floor, cementing police stations shut. These people are trying to kill. They're doing it in such a way that it's hard to say it's intentional. And look, I know a lot of people are saying, of course they're intentionally doing it, Tim. What I'm saying is, the guy in Portland pulled out a gun, bang, bang. They were hunting for people. They said, we got him right here. We got a couple right here. Most people assume, what does that mean? They were looking for people. The guy who got killed was near his home. That's the extent to which this insanity is occurring. The governments of these cities and states could stop it. They could come in and shut it down. They won't. The DA in Portland's like, yeah, whatever. They still haven't arrested the guy. He's being investigated. We'll see. We don't know if he did it innocent until proven guilty. I'll give you that. So Donald Trump could come in. But these governors, these mayors, are sitting back and watching the suffering of their own residents. They don't care. You know why? Because they don't want to have to admit Trump was right. Now here comes the administrative escalation. We've seen physical escalation. This, what Trump is doing, administrative escalation. Both, we have a clear two sides to this. We have clear disdain for the federal government because they just hate Trump irrationally. They've lost it. But where does this escalation go? Both sides are put between a rock and a hard place. Donald Trump is being blamed for the violence, yet he's offered up federal assistance every step of the way. The governors, the mayors say, F you. They rather watch their cities burn. And then Joe Biden comes out and says, that's Trump's fault, isn't it? So Trump says, I'll tell you what. We will take away your funding because you will not police your streets. You want to blame me? Why are we giving you money? What do we get? In Staten Island, one of the moderate Democrats who claimed they were going to fight for kitchen table issues and then immediately voted to impeach Trump says Trump is just defunding the police by doing this. Well, so what? New York wants to defund the police. Why should I care if Trump agrees with them, right? You wanted this, didn't you? You wanted to defund the police? Oh, but this guy, he's like, well, it was wrong to defund the police. Yeah. New York City stripped $1 billion from their police and got rid of their plainclothes unit. And I guess they stopped. They were going to hire about 1,163 officers and then said, no, we're not going to do that now. There you go. Now shootings are on the rise. Murder is on the rise. There's a big lethal crime spike. Petty crimes down. That's true. So what happens? There is an administrative escalation occurring where California, Oregon, and Washington have already, according to these stories from the Boston Globe and the New York Times and many other outlets, would prefer to secede from the union and allow Trump to be president again. In these war games, John Podesta was playing Joe Biden, and he said, the party will not allow me to concede. So he demanded several states send in pro-Biden electors, even though the states were for Trump. And then apparently, in some of this reporting, he encouraged West Coast to secede. They were ready to dip out. That could just be hyperbole, I suppose. But these are all grains of sand that will eventually make up a heap. They are straws being placed on the camel's back, and eventually the camel's back will break. It's already hard enough for the camel to bear the amount of straw we've placed on his back. Now with Trump saying we're going to take away your funding, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? I don't know. What should Trump do if he can't if he can't invoke the Insurrection Act and actually deal with this? How can he make them actually enforce the law? Here's what Cuomo said. New York Governor Cuomo on Wednesday all but threatened President Trump's safety if he returns to New York in a rant, responding to an exclusive story by the Post that Trump is looking to pull federal funds from lawless cities. Cuomo called an emergency press briefing within half an hour on Wednesday to tear into Trump for the order, which cites New York's rising murder rate and defunding the NYPD. Quote, he better have an army. If he thinks he's going to walk down the street in New York, New Yorkers don't want to have anything to do with him, the Democrat said, all but threatening the commander-in-chief. But Cuomo, who like Trump hails from Queens, wasn't done. He can't have enough bodyguards to walk through New York City. People don't want to have anything to do with him. That's a threat. I get it. The veiled game mafioso-like threat is, hey, man, it would be a shame if somebody came out and, hurt the president, huh? We know what he's saying. Sure, there's probably a lot of New Yorkers who like to, burn, loot, and murder who would come out and be very, very upset with the president. But the president's standard security detail is good enough, I'd imagine. And I don't think he'd have a problem going through New York City. I don't think he'd need an army. What is Cuomo trying to say here? Rhetoric is intensifying across the board. And if you don't think that we're on the verge of something explosive, then I just feel like you haven't been paying attention. And I get a lot of people like to say, Tim's catastrophizing. Whatever, man. I could be wrong. I absolutely admit that. There's a weird, it's a weird situation that I find myself in as somebody who just turned a camera on one day and started complaining about his feelings on the internet to now have so many people watching, and much respect to all of you. I'm sincerely grateful. And now I have people acting as though, I guess with large viewership comes great responsibility, but I'll tell you this. I'm not going to change my opinions. I'm not going to pretend like this isn't happening before our eyes simply because more people decide to watch and hear what I have to say. I, like many other people, am just a dude reading things on the internet and talking about how I feel about them. But I do this for a living. I read the news all day, every day, and I'm telling you what I'm seeing right now. At the administrative level, we have states telling Trump, F you. We had the attorney general in Oregon sue on behalf of the rioters who were beating people and trying to burn down a federal courthouse. When Trump sent in U.S. Marshals, the CBP, ICE, et cetera, to guard it, they claimed he was a fascist sending in, secret police. Right now, these states would rather watch their own jurisdictions burn than to allow Trump any victories. And you know what that says to me? We're on the verge of some kind of very serious constitutional crisis with violence being backed by many of these politicians in these cities. Right now, many of these cities and states are providing some kind of tacit support for the violence by refusing to do anything about it. By refusing to do anything about it, it makes it inherently unsafe for the president. So to Cuomo's credit, yeah, he's right. Trump better have an army in the sense that because they've defunded the police, because murders are on the rise, because they've gotten rid of their plainclothes anti-crime unit, and they froze the hiring of about 1,000 police officers, the streets have become particularly unsafe. They made it unsafe. They chose to defund the police. And then Cuomo has the nerve to come out and say, well, Trump better bring an army because it would be a shame if one of these violent murderers romping around through the streets got mad at him. That's your fault, Cuomo. So take a look at what we're looking at what's happening right now. On the ground level, we're going to see clashes in Portland at the end of this month. It's a guarantee. Right-wing groups are going to clash with left-wing groups. Propaganda is going to be flying. And there's no one on the left or the right that's willing to change their mind, for the most part. We do tend to see more walk away from the left to the right than the other way around. There's very few people who leave the right for the left. But it's still, there was a story in Vox the other day. Will anyone really change their mind on Trump? And I think the answer is no. No. Early on, before all the riots, I was, I'm not going to vote for Trump. And then things started getting worse. And I was like, I probably will have to vote for him. And now I'm definitely voting for him. There are a lot of people, however, on the left that say the exact same things, but believe they're the ones that are correct. The problem, let me tell you something. The people on the left who say the same things like Fox News is lying and Trump supporters are brainwashed, they're not actually following the news. They're following the fake news. And it's a funny thing to say, but they are. Donald Trump will say something and they'll take the most extreme interpretation and they'll spin it through the wash cycle and it'll come out 100 times worse. Trump is not perfect. He says a lot of dumb things. He made a comment about people voting and then mail-in voting, seeing how it plays out. It was a really dumb comment to make. But that's not the issue. The issue is we have video of what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. You watch that video and you're like, wow, it's not so cut and dry. I was having a conversation with, I posted something on Facebook and a woman started saying, how could you defend Rittenhouse? And I laid it out. I made a big post and they said, and then someone sent a video and they watched the video and said, wow, I hadn't considered that. I think the phenomenon of getting the left to leave the left is a lot easier because that's where the truth is, not on the left. So right now you have a lot of people who are NPCs who will, they'll turn on CNN and Brian Stelter will be like, Fox News is fake. Don't watch them. Never watch information outside of my channel. There's no riots. There are no riots in Portland. It's just not happening. There's some violence for sure, but it's not really that bad. And then people believe it. And then we watch the videos and we can see 90 plus days of fires being set. The mayor saying they're trying to kill people, them trying to burn down a residential condo building. It may be a little hyperbolic to say, but they threw flaming debris into the first floor, which absolutely was an attempt to set fire to the building. They started showing up to residential houses. They're attacking them. The AG in Oregon defended them. They're rejecting Trump. They're resisting law enforcement. They're cutting these people loose. The DA is releasing them. And we heard several stories. Like just the other day, I covered this. There was a far leftist who got arrested. They cut him loose. Within a few days, he murdered 2 people because these people are crazy and because they don't want to deal with it. And you had the guy who, the alleged murderer in Portland. He was arrested apparently more than once on illegal gun charges. He had tried to take a gun from somebody and then by pulling on it, it went off and went through his arm. Oh, of course, he tries to frame the story as I was trying to stop a shooter. No, you were just trying to steal a gun from some guy. And that guy goes on to kill somebody. Now Cuomo has the nerve to say this. Look at, he says, it is more of the same from him. It's political, it's gratuitous, it's illegal, but it's another attempt to kill New York City. President Ford said drop dead. President Trump has been actively trying to kill New York City since he's been elected. That's just not true. I think you have, Cuomo. I really do. And Bill de Blasio as well. And this is the craziest thing. Bill de Blasio and Cuomo put up checkpoints around New York. 2-week quarantine if you want to go in there. $10,000 fine for breaking. So there's no tourism. They force all the businesses shut. They're straight up saying, we will not allow indoor dining. They're doing it in New Jersey, not in New York. So the businesses that went down will go down forever. And then they turn around and say, Trump. This is Trump's fault. It's like that meme where the guy's riding the bike and he jams the stick in the front tire and flips over. This is Trump's America. Dude, you run New York. All of this murder, the collapse of the New York economy, that's not Trump's fault. That's your fault. You're the one who put sick people into nursing homes. That's why your death rate from COVID was so high. I wonder if that's the name of the game. Cuomo and de Blasio purposefully sabotage their city and then go, but Trump did this. You know what, man? It might work on some people. It doesn't work on me. Trump runs the federal government. You are responsible for your city and your state. And right now, Cuomo, there are people protesting in upstate New York because a video came out from March of a man dying in police custody. I got to be careful about how I reference that, what happened, because the story is breaking. But apparently there was a guy who was mentally unwell and the police were trying to detain him. They put a spit hood on him and the man lost his life. Now protests are erupting. It really does feel like, in combination with the media, think about it this way. People die all the time. And there are people who die in police custody and sometimes it's an accident. This is look, cops have to deal with unruly and unwell people, and sometimes these things happen. They shouldn't. People should not die, ever. And I think it's good that there's scrutiny on many of these circumstances, and we investigate how did someone lose their life, because we can't have police going around and we can't have people dying. But it's true that sometimes these things will happen. And it's not because someone's got intent to kill. It's because bad things happen. But we do want to review them because while we might not hold the police responsible for the death, we got to hold the system responsible. Meaning, if we tell someone, we want you to hold a person down in this way and it's resulting in death, maybe we should change that, figure out other ways to do things. You see what I mean? So we're seeing that. And okay, but think about what's happening. Is every single instance now going to be major news? It is, but not the other way around. If a black cop is killed, it's not going to be a huge story. David Dorn was only a huge story because conservatives demanded that people recognize this man and his life being taken from him. The left didn't want to prop that story up. They didn't run big headlines and complain about it. So I'll tell you, the media is fanning the flames because they know it incites and enrages many on the far left. It will rile them up and get them traffic and they'll make money. They then go out, burn, loot, murder. And then the governors who refuse to enforce the law and the mayors who refuse to enforce the law blame Trump. Trump then says, okay, well, if you won't enforce the law, why are we giving you money? They then strike back and say, you better have an army next time you come here. You see, the rhetoric is getting intense. We've got physical confrontation and escalation. We've got targeted murder in Portland combined with the administrative escalation where the high-level politicians are pointing the finger at each other, and it is getting dangerous. I believe we're past the counting heads phase. The lines have been drawn almost entirely. People will not change their mind. You could tell any one of the people on the left about what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. They don't care. They won't believe you. They'll say no. Facebook will ban you for defending him. Even the lawyers for Rittenhouse are getting suspended on Twitter. And Cuomo, you better have an army when you come in. What does that mean? Does that mean that Trump has to come in with the Insurrection Act? I didn't get to it, but maybe I'll have to do another segment on this. Why Trump doesn't just send in the troops. The general idea, imagine if Cuomo, having threatened Trump this way, Trump comes in with the military to try and stop the violence. Now, New York City hasn't seen the same level of violence as many other places. The looting, chilled out quite a bit. But imagine if Trump went into any one of these jurisdictions with the Insurrection Act. You would have la resistance. They would call it the invasion. And that would be the Civil War. Trump invoking the Insurrection Act, I believe, would ignite a hot civil war. It would be the shot heard around the world. I believe it may be coming. We'll see how it plays out. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.